This cop thought he pulled over a car thief. What he got was a Superior Court judge. If Judge Rhonda Coleman had left the house 5 minutes earlier, she might have never crossed paths with Officer Brent Holstead. It was a Thursday. No rain, no fog, no distractions. Just a stretch of highway in Clovis, California, glinting under the early sun. Judge Coleman, dressed in a navy blue pantsuit, had her hair pinned back tight the way she always wore it for court. Her silver Lexus, a 2022 model, glided along the right lane as she reviewed her mental checklist, finished sentencing reports before noon, meet with the DA by 3, and maybe, just maybe, leave early to catch dinner with her husband. The calm ended at the intersection of Sierra and Ashland. That's where the lights came on behind her, red and blue flashing siren just long enough to make the point. She glanced at the mirror, confused. No speeding, no swerving, no phone in hand. Still, she flicked on her signal and pulled to the curb, heart beating a little harder. Not from fear, but from experience. She reached for her wallet, pulled out her driver's license, registration, and judicial ID, placing them neatly on the dashboard where they could be seen through the glass, hands back on the wheel, fingers open, visible. The officer approached with brisk steps. He was tall, white, probably mid to late 30s, with a fresh badge and the kind of walk that said he still thought the uniform gave him something to prove. "License and registration," he said. "No, good morning. No reason given." "They're right here on the dash, officer," she said, her voice measured and firm. "May I reach for them? Just get them." He didn't look at the documents as she handed them over. At least not right away. His eyes lingered on her face, then down to her clothes, then to the steering wheel. "This your car?" She blinked. "It is." He looked at the license, then back at her. "You say your name's Rhonda Coleman?" "I didn't say it, but yes, it's on the license." A beat, then another. "Mind stepping out of the vehicle for me?" The question came flat. No explanation, no context, just the sort of vague command that people like her had learned to interpret with precision. "I am not sure I understand," she said, careful not to sound defensive. "Is there an issue? You match the description of a suspect connected to a vehicle theft reported about 10 minutes ago," he said. She felt her stomach twist, but not with fear, with something colder. "This is my car, officer. I have the registration and my ID. You're welcome to call dispatch to verify both." I said, "Step out of the vehicle." She didn't move. A few early walkers along the sidewalk had slowed down. One young man across the street had his phone out. Camera pointed at them. That didn't calm Officer H. Halstead. If anything, it seemed to make him stiffer. "Sir," she said, steady now, "you're making a mistake. I'm Judge Rhonda Coleman, Fresno County Superior Court. This vehicle is mine, registered to me and my husband." He glanced down at the ID, his lips curled slightly. "Anybody can make a fake badge. I've seen it before. I'd suggest you confirm it with dispatch before this goes any further." But the officer had already unclipped the holster on his belt. Hand hovered, breath tight. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It was a challenge. But if Rhonda thought her credentials would shield her, the next few minutes would prove just how fragile that illusion really was. The thing about moments like this is how quiet they get. No matter how many cars pass, how many people stand around, it's like the world leans in to listen. Judge Coleman's left hand stayed on the wheel. Her right rested lightly on her thigh. Her voice never wavered, but her jaw was clenched just enough to betray the tension building in her chest. "Officer, I'm going to ask you again. Please confirm my identity with dispatch." But Officer Halstead wasn't budging. The corner of his mouth twitched, not a smile, something more irritated. His hand didn't move far, but it stayed close to the weapon at his waist. "I gave you an order. Step out of the vehicle now." She didn't move. Instead, she asked calmly, "Are you detaining me or am I free to go?" His silence answered everything. Behind him, a woman holding a Starbucks cup paused on the sidewalk. "She's a judge," the woman called out. "I know her. That's Judge Coleman from Channel 26. The officer turned his head, but only slightly. "Ma'am, please keep walking." Rhonda took a breath, slow and deep. She reached again for a judicial ID and held it out the window, her fingers trembling now, not from fear but from disbelief. This badge was issued by the state of California. If you have reason to believe I've committed a crime, I'll cooperate fully. But you're escalating a situation that shouldn't have started in the first place. He finally snatched the ID from her hand, looked at it, frowned, and still he wasn't satisfied. You said the car is yours, right? Yes. Well, I ran the plate. It's registered under a Tarot N. She almost laughed but didn't. Instead, she spoke slowly, eyes locked on his. That's my husband. We've been married 26 years. If you looked further down the DMV file, you'd see both our names. His eyes narrowed. So you're telling me a man bought this car and put your name on it too? No, I'm telling you we bought the car together. Joint account, joint title, because that's how married people do things. Another voice from the sidewalk. You're embarrassing yourself, man. But Officer Holstead wasn't listening. Or maybe he was, just not to anyone saying something he didn't want to hear. Without warning, he reached for the door handle. That's when Judge Coleman locked it. Do not open my door. I have not consented to a search or seizure. You're obstructing, he snapped. I'm asserting my rights. He took a half step back, lips tight, called into his radio. I've got a 1029, possible stolen vehicle match. Driver is refusing to comply, requesting backup. More eyes turned. More phones came out. Rhonda stared straight ahead, hands back on the wheel. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. This isn't about the car. He didn't respond. This is about how you see me again. Nothing. This is about what you assume when someone like me drives something like this in a neighborhood like this. Still nothing. Then quietly she added, But I will not be bullied out of my rights, officer. Not now. Not ever. His jaw clenched. A siren wailed in the distance. Backup was on the way. But this wasn't just a traffic stop anymore. This was about pride, power, and the painful cost of someone refusing to back down on either side. 2 minutes passed, maybe 3. It felt longer. Rhonda didn't flink. When the second patrol car rolled up, tires crunching the gravel near the curb, a younger officer stepped out. Latino, early 30 seconds, softer demeanor. He looked at her, then at Holstead, then at the growing crowd. Holstead, what's going on? The younger officer asked. Possible 10 to 29, Holstead muttered, nodding toward the Lexus. She's refusing to exit the vehicle. Claims she's a judge, says the car is hers. The new officer walked closer to the driver's window. His eyes scanned the ID still in H. Halstead's hand. Wait, he said, glancing back. This is Judge Coleman. I know who she is. She presided over that burglary case in Madera 2 weeks ago. Remember the one with the school? Holstead shrugged. Could be fake. I doubt it. Rhonda didn't say anything. She let them speak. She wanted them to hear each other because this wasn't about her proving herself. It was about them seeing what had been right in front of them all along. The younger officer, his name tag read, turned back toward her. Judge Coleman, I'm sorry you've been stopped like this. May I call the station to verify your credentials? Please do, she said calmly. And while you're at it, confirm the car's ownership. Soto nodded, walked a few feet away, and started speaking into his shoulder mic. Meanwhile, Holstead stood still. His face wasn't angry. It wasn't confused either. It was something worse, like he was trying to figure out how to save face. Why didn't you just say who you were when I asked the first time? He muttered. Rhonda turned her head slowly. I didn't think I needed to announce my title to validate my humanity. That hit harder than any raised voice ever could. A man in the crowd filming every thing called out, she's handling this better than I would. I'll tell you that much. More people nodded. A mother, pushing a stroller, whispered something to her son and crossed the street to watch from the shade. The tension shifted. Not gone, but shifting. Soto returned. Confirmed, he said. She is Judge Rhonda Coleman. The vehicle is registered under both her name and her husband's. Holstead stayed quiet. Do you still need her to exit the vehicle? Soto asked, glancing toward him. Holstead's lips parted, then closed again. His pride was too thick to swallow. Rhonda unlocked the door herself and stepped out, not because she was told to, but because the crowd deserved to see her stand tall. She didn't raise her voice, didn't cuss, didn't break down. She simply looked Officer Holstead in the eye and said, You stopped me because I didn't fit the picture in your head. That's not law enforcement, that's profiling. He didn't respond. Sato, sensing the moment, gently stepped in. Judge Coleman, he said again. I'm sorry. If you'd like to file a complaint, I can give you the department contact. I know the number, she said, but I think this footage will say more than paperwork ever could. She looked out at the crowd. More than a dozen now. Cameras still rolling, silence thick as cement. Y'all can stop filming now, she said to them. I'm not hurt. I'm not broken. Just late for court. But the damage was already done. And the real question wasn't whether she'd be okay. It was what this said about the people supposed to protect everyone, not just the ones who look like them. As Rhonda walked back toward her car, the crowd slowly parted. Some nodded silently. Others whispered to each other. A woman in scrubs mouthed, I'm so sorry. As Rhonda passed, she didn't respond. Didn't need to. Her presence alone said what words couldn't. But H. Hall Holstead still hadn't moved. He stood by his cruiser, staring at the concrete, hand resting on his belt like a child who didn't know what to do after being caught in a lie. Sato walked over and spoke in a lower voice, but not low enough. You need to write this up. She's going to report it. We all saw how this went down. Holstead's jaw flexed. I followed protocol. No, you followed your gut, and your gut was wrong. Rhonda could have driven off. She had everything she needed, but something made her pause before opening the driver's door. She turned and looked back. Officer Holstead, she said, voice calm but heavy. Have you ever been mistaken for a criminal just because of how you look? He looked up, startled. No, she nodded. I thought so. That was it. No rant, no performance, just a mirror held up at the worst possible time. She got in the car, closed the door, and took a moment to breathe. Not because she was afraid, but because she knew what would come next. Phone calls, statements, media inquiries, and worse, people trying to turn what happened into politics instead of a problem. As she pulled off, the crowd slowly dispersed, the tension evaporating into the Fresno heat. But one thing lingered. Every single person there would remember how it felt to watch someone with power, education, and a spotless record still get treated like a suspect. Back at the precinct, Holstead sat at his desk typing a report with robotic keystrokes. Chief Daniels, black, late 50s, stern but fair, walked into the room, holding a print D copy of the initial stop notification. Judge Coleman. Holstead looked up. Yes, sir. Daniels pulled out the chair across from him and sat. No yelling, no slamming files, just eye contact. I went to law school with her, he said. You know that? Holstead said nothing. Top of her class. Could have gone corporate, made real money, but she came back to serve her county. And you pulled her over because what? She didn't fit your image of who should be driving a Lexus. I had a bolo on a stolen car, Holstead muttered. Don't play with me, Daniels said sharply. We both know that's not what this was. Holstead looked away. Daniels leaned forward. You ever ask yourself why you assumed she was lying when all her paperwork was in order and her ID checked out? Still silence. The chief stood up. You're going to write that report. You're going to take a few days off. And when you come back, we'll talk about retraining if we still have a place for you here. Holstead's face turned red, but he didn't argue. He finally nodded. Out in the parking lot, Officer Soto stood by his car, watching the sun begin to dip behind the county courthouse. He texted his wife, late again, sorry, and then looked back at the building. He didn't know Judge Coleman personally, but he'd seen her enough times to know she treated people fairly, white, black, or anything in between, and today she treated them with more grace than most would have managed. But even as things settled, one truth remained. Respectability doesn't grant immunity, not when bias speaks louder than facts. By the time Rhonda reached the courthouse, she was 42 minutes late. Her assistant, Troy, a wiry guy with glasses and a notepad always glued to his hand, met her at the entrance, worry written all over his face. Judge Coleman, are you okay? She nodded but didn't stop walking. I'm fine. Start pushing the 10:15 to the afternoon docket. Move the 11 Hunquark to tomorrow if defense doesn't object. Troy hesitated, walking beside her. I saw something online. It's already going viral. She paused. Video. He nodded. Let it run, she said. The world needs to see what power looks like when it's challenged for no reason. Courtroom 2B was quiet when she entered. Her robe waited on the chair. She slipped it on slowly, tying it at the waist like armor. The bailiff stood straighter when he saw her. Attorneys rose. One defendant whispered to his public defender, pointing her out. Rhonda stepped up to the bench and took her seat. "Good morning," she said, voice smooth. "Let's proceed." The court reporter started typing. Case after case, she focused. Focus was easier than thinking. But between motions and objections, her mind drifted, not to Holstead, but to what this meant for every young girl watching that video. Every future judge, every future anything. During recess, she sat alone in chambers, sipping the same cold coffee she hadn't touched since morning. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was Troy again. "There's someone here asking to speak with you, says he's from the mayor's office." Rhonda set the coffee down. "Send him in." A tall man in a gray suit stepped in. Early 40 seconds, calm voice. "Judge Coleman, I'm Darren Levy, Chief Policy Advisor to Mayor Price. I came as soon as we confirmed what happened this morning." She gave a small nod. "Appreciate that." He sat carefully. "We're deeply embarrassed and we're also Ride. This footage is spreading fast. The mayor's hoping you might issue a public statement." Rhonda leaned back, her face unreadable. "You want me to clean it up?" No, that's not what I meant. You want me to soften it," she said plainly. "Make it easier for the department, smoother for the city." He hesitated. "We just want to avoid more tension." She stared at him, then asked, "Why do you think it caused tension?" He didn't answer. "It's because people saw something they already knew. But this time, they couldn't deny it. This time, it was a judge in broad daylight. No hoodie, no running, no confusion, just black, and that's why people are angry." Levy shifted in his seat. "I'm not going to stand in front of cameras to make anyone feel better," she said. "But I will say this, I'm not going to let it slide. If I don't speak up, I become part of the problem." He nodded slowly, understood. She dismissed him with a glance. After he left, she looked at the framed photo on her desk. Her and Terrell smiling outside their first house almost 30 years ago, back when they still believed hard work was a guarantee. She whispered to the empty room, "Some things still haven't changed." But this wasn't about her alone anymore. It was about what people would learn from seeing who she was, and how quickly it was all ignored the moment she sat behind the wheel of the wrong car on the wrong street. 3 days later, the video had been shared over 4 million times. Morning talk shows replayed it with headlines like "Judge Profiled in Traffic Stop" and "Justice Meets Injustice on the Side of the Road." Local newspapers ran op-eds. Civil rights attorneys quoted it in interviews. College professors assigned it in class. But back at the Clovis Police Department, the mood was far from public outrage. It was quieter, heavier. Officer Brent H. Halstead sat in a meeting room with Internal Affairs. His uniform jacket hung limp on the chair behind him. He'd been placed on administrative leave, paid for now. Across the table, Lieutenant Marie Trent read through the report line by line. She presented ID. She presented registration. She identified herself clearly. "You chose to ignore all of that. Why?" He stared at the wall behind her, picking at the corner of his notepad. "I've made stops like that before." She leaned forward. "And how many of those people were 52-year-old black women with a government-issued ID that said they were a judge?" He stayed silent. "This is a problem, Brent. Not just for you, for all of us." He looked down. "I didn't mean for it to get that far," he mumbled. "It got out of hand." Trent exhaled sharply. "You were given authority and a badge. That doesn't make you infallible. It makes you responsible." That word hit hard. Responsible. Later that afternoon, Chief Daniels held a press briefing. He stood at a podium with folded hands. No teleprompter. What happened to Judge Rhonda Coleman was unacceptable. It wasn't an isolated incident. It was the result of a pattern, one that too often goes unchecked. That ends today. Reporters threw questions. Was H. Halstead fired? Would there be charges? Daniels answered only what he could legally confirm. But one thing was clear. The city was watching. And so was Rhonda. She sat in her living room that night. No robe, no courtroom, just herself. Barefoot, tired, but not broken. Terrell passed her the remote. "You want me to turn it off?" "No," she said. "Let it play." The news anchor's voice filled the room. While the department faces scrutiny, Judge Coleman has yet to speak to the press directly. Sources close to the family say she's focused on her work and the larger conversation this incident has sparked. Rhonda turned to her husband. "You know what the hardest part was?" He shook his head. "It wasn't him pulling me over. It was realizing that after everything, school, law, the gay, the bench, I still had to prove I belonged behind the wheel. But this wasn't just about one stop or one officer anymore. It was about a system and the cracks that show when someone finally refuses to shrink inside it." The following week, Judge Coleman walked into a packed auditorium at Fresno State University. She hadn't planned to speak publicly, but when the university's Black Law Students Association asked her to attend their forum on systemic bias, she didn't hesitate. No press, no speeches, just a circle of folding chairs, students in hoodies and jeans, notebooks open, eyes wide. She sat with them, no robe, no podium, just Rhonda, the woman behind the bench, the woman behind the wheel. A student in the front row raised her hand. "Judge Coleman, I watched the video a dozen times. How did you stay so calm?" Rhonda smiled, but her eyes carried something heavier. "Because I've been preparing for that moment my whole life," she said. "When I was 15, my father sat me down and told me, 'Someday someone's going to look at you and only see a threat. Doesn't matter what you've done, doesn't matter what you wear, but you've got to choose who you're going to be in that moment. You can protect your pride, or you can protect your life.'" The room fell silent. Another student asked, "Would you do anything differently?" Rhonda thought for a second. "No," she said, "but I wish I didn't have to be perfect just to be believed." Murmurs of agreement moved around the room. One girl wiped a tear from her cheek. A young man nodded slowly like he'd been waiting to hear someone say that out loud. Rhonda continued, "People always say, just comply. But when you comply and you're still questioned, still threatened, what then? What do you tell your children? What do you tell yourself?" She looked up and made eye contact with nearly every student in the room. "I'm not here because I want sympathy. I'm here because silence protects the wrong people. And I want you to know it's okay to speak up. It's okay to demand better. But when you do, be prepared because people won't always like who you are when you stop apologizing for it." Applause didn't break out immediately. Instead, there was reflection, nods, stillness, the kind that sinks in deep. Later that night, as Rhonda drove home, same Lexus, same route. Her hand stayed steady on the wheel. No fear this time, no shame, just clarity. She wasn't just a judge anymore. She was a reminder that dignity can't be stripped by suspicion, that status doesn't shield you, but character might, and that sometimes your calm can be louder than any protest, because real change doesn't always start with shouting. Sometimes it starts with a stop and how you choose to respond. If you're watching this and you felt something, anger, sadness, recognition, don't let it fade. Speak up when you see injustice, even if it's uncomfortable, because silence isn't neutral. And respect shouldn't depend on what someone looks like. Share this story. Talk about it. And most of all, listen when people say this isn't rare. It's just finally being seen,